mother-in-law. Remember, Nina Pinta Santa Maria. They had a daughter named Catherine of Aragon, and she had a baby with King Henry VIII. I think he was 11 and she was 14. They were very young, whatever they were very young, and the baby was reported stillborn. So Light, May Musk, in the book, said that this is their story, okay? This is, because I get really embarrassed when I tell the story and people go, wow, that's some crazy shit. I'm just telling you what they are running off of. This is their battery, okay? This is the story.
Could I interject for just a second?
Yeah,
because it's something I tell my listeners all the time.
Okay.
Keep in mind, it doesn't matter if you believe any of this or not. You could think it's absolute total nonsense. What you need to understand is there are people in positions of power in this world that very much believe in these things, and the things they do to act upon their beliefs affect all of us. So it's important you understand this, because this is one of the explanations as to the why and the how they do the things that they do. So with that caveat in mind, you could go ahead and proceed. Don't be apologetic about it.
So do you know what a moon child is?
Yes.
Charlie Manson is reportedly a moon child, and that is why they worship him, even though he's a greasy, gross hippie. He's their creation, and they're propping him up for the end of the world. Well, I'm a moon child too, because my mother was, I'm not sure if they seeded my grandma or if my grandma, I'm not sure if we're even related to my grandfather, okay? Because I have the same chin as the CIA agent that's been my mother's handler. And I'm like, where did I get this butt chin? Oh, and I have a picture. Oh, no, shit. And my daughter calls me and goes, where did we get that butt chin? I go, I think we got it from the CIA. Okay. My mother was born and bred on the military base. They did a whole bunch of operations. They turned boys into girls. They split personalities. My mother became a madam of San Francisco. It's not her fault. Look what they did to her. Then she was 18 years old, a blonde, blue-eyed virgin before she was a madam. Her graduating class, which is the whole class from Texas, the babies that were born in Texas, now they're blonde, blue-eyed virgins in San Francisco. So that's, a couple thousand miles. Same military operation, decades later. 7 Spanish brothers show up with a batch of LSD on Halloween night. They hit town, these girls. It's a military housing, but it's 3 miles south of San Francisco. They lure them. My mom said, Mary, I'm just a teenager. I just want to booze and cigarettes, go dance into the hop, and make out with somebody. And she said they drugged us with LSD. And we never heard of LSD because it's a CIA thing. It's a Ken Kesey thing. And that's a whole other rabbit hole, Ken Kesey. And you probably know all about that. And I play music with his cousin. He's my fiddler. And Ken Kesey's buried near me. And, because the CIA recruited professors and doctors and all of that, and people that fake their own deaths. But, okay, so my mother was born in Texas, and in San Francisco, they lured her to this party on Halloween, drugged it, the punch, and then raped the girls. Now, have you heard of seventh son of a seventh son?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my father is Emmanuel Aragon, seventh son of a seventh son. And I guess I'm the lottery winner because they came back. They not only drug you, rape you, but these people are arrogant enough to come back and kidnap you for a blood test to make sure you are one of them. And I was the seventh son's daughter, the one and only that night. So, because I asked God to show me, God, am I going crazy or are they targeting me? Because they appear in my life, they appear in my life, they appear in my life. When I won't cooperate, they just appear in my path. So all I had was my words. So my mother on her deathbed. So I know I was from my mother's rape and LSD, but on my mother's deathbed, she says, just before she died, before she was bedridden, she says, Mary, I ran into light. I said, Mom, nobody runs into light. She appeared in your path. She wants something. What does she want? My mom said, Mary, she wants you back. This is your ticket back in. And my mother held out a book. And it was an ancient bloodline book. She said, Light sent you this book. And I pulled my sleeves over my hands and I pushed it away and I melted into the corner and said, don't open that book, Mom. Don't open that book, Mom. There's demons in there. Don't open it. Mom, I'd rather drink creek water than rule the world with them. Mom. And I told the first interview, I said, look, my mom, she was a badass bitch. She was mean and ruthless and beautiful and heartless at times, but she wasn't down with plotting the end of the world. Just one of her personalities was pissed off. You know, like Beth Sutton, only worse. So I pull my sleeves over my hands and I go, don't open that book, Mom. My mom says, but Mary, it's about your bloodline. I said, I don't want to hear it. Okay. So basically the book that I wouldn't touch and I wouldn't take said that the Illuminati midwives switched babies and stole the true Aragon bloodline baby with King Henry VIII, the bloodline to rule the world, because these people are that arrogant. They're eugenics, right? What's the word for people that believe in eugenics? They are
eugenicists.
Thank you, eugenicists. They've been playing with the bloodline all along. So all I've had is my words, and trust me, I've been the crazy lady that lived in the baseball dugout between games, right? Like that's where it's at, like, right? So I have a book with Catherine of Aragon holding her monkey. I'm like, oh, here's me with my monkey. And we got the monkey from Elon's lab where he's doing I'm like, oh, that's not coincidence. None of this. Like, when am I going to wake up, right? Bob Dylan wrote a great song, When You Going to Wake Up and Strengthen Things That Remain, right? It's a line from Revelation. So this is all about eugenics. They are breeding the Antichrist. This is Rosemary's baby. I could tell you a bazillion other stories about me dancing with Elon and things that he'd slip and say about when we're wed. When we rule the world, we're going to rule the white world. And Joaquin will rule when I rejected Elon, they said Joaquin will rule the Mexican world. I think Joaquin is El Chapo. He's that little drug mule from when I was a kid. And I said, that little boy? But that's another story, because I'm not here to tell you about him. I'm here to tell you everything on the news. Nothing's correct. Wiki's lying about everything. Because nothing I say about Elon lines up with space and time and location and death, dates. His grandfather was, when I first saw him on the news and I went and researched on the internet and I didn't know how to screen share or save a picture or any of that, right? I found 12 newspapers that talked about Elon's grandfather, and they were following him all over the world, basically with pitchforks to say, watch out for that no good, dirty commie bastard, right? And they knew who he was. So he had to fake his death because, right? But my grandpa knew who he was, and he got right up and kicked his ass right in the middle of the street during his lemonade. He didn't finish that lemonade. He smashed it down and he kicked some Nazi ass. When I said, Grandpa, what's a technocrat? And he said, they're Nazis, Mary, they're Nazis. And I said, oh, and this is so sad. I said, I don't work for the Nazis, Grandpa. I work for the Mansons. And he looked at me with shock and horror. Now, those fuckers, so basically, excuse my language, that church committee document is a hoax. They didn't stop it. And my grandmother was a house girl, if you want to call it. That's the cover story. Because I'm titled as Elon Musk babysitter. They born and bred me. They born and bred my mother. You know, they're probably boinking my grandma behind my grandpa's back because my grandma was in on all of this, taking me to the castle 3 miles south of San Francisco and taking blood out of my neck until I started to talk at about the age of 7. There's a castle with gargoyles and obelisks, and it's got a beautiful merman coming up over the door, you know, with tentacles, a beast rising out of the sea, like it talks about Revelation. Yeah, so those Aragon brothers, all I had was my words. I had no proof. I said right in the beginning, just a hippie in the woods with my memories, but I'm telling you the truth. So I didn't start with batshit crazy. I started with Elon Musk's grandfather was arrested in 1940 for being a technocrat leader, plotting to take over the world by force with robots. And that's public knowledge. And if you look, you can look it up. Now, I threw in the part about and was kicked out of Canada. And I love that that went around the world too, because I can't find any print of that. But my grandpa said kicked out of Canada. So my grandpa must have knew what was going on, because most of my story is just my memories and the words that I'm recalling. And I didn't have any proof of anything except for finally when I learned how to screen share, there was one newspaper from 1940 that I could find about Haldeman being, and do you know that they actually, so basically Hitler's taking over the world, right? The world is afraid. They're wondering, is this going to come to America? They're being mean to their neighbors, you know. They don't trust their neighbors anymore. We built concentration camps. And here Haldeman in Canada, who's Canada's all neutral, Haldeman gets caught with his pants down, holding secret meetings, plotting to take over the world. He's basically like Hitler to Canada, guys. And then when he got arrested, 600 cars from Los Angeles gassed up and drove. They had a technocrat symbol, kind of like the yin yang thing. It was their own little symbol. And they drove, honked their horns all the way to wherever he was in jail, and drove around and honked their horns, and people were terrified. And they let him. I bet you there were 666 cars, just to be honest, right? But they weren't.
I wouldn't doubt it. Knowing how many people were, I wouldn't doubt it.
This is Elon's grandfather plotting to take over the world by force with robots in the future. And everybody knew it. And they were prime ripe. They'd lost their friends and brothers and family and loved ones. And they were fresh back from war. And all these rumors of treason and, you know, us giving Nazis great lands and titles. Werner von Braun. I've been to that cemetery, but I've been there in 1971. And I don't believe Werner von Braun was posted as dead until 77. But I've been to that actual cemetery. I have a picture of me. So Werner von Braun, right, Werner von Braun was the head of NASA. He was a Nazi, and he killed a lot of people in these tests. I think the pressurized tests, they mess up your blood, right? And these Nazis, I'm sure you know about boys from Brazil. I was driving in the car after waking up and seeing Elon and going, oh shit, time's up. I better warn somebody. And then I just hid behind letters and I just wrote letters about Elon's grandpa. But the second I started talking about Elon opening a portal, nobody wanted to talk to me, because that did happen. And I will talk to you about that if you want. But I wanted to really establish that these guys are Nazis. They're Luciferians. They're the Illuminati. They're plotting to take over the world by force with robots. And something we didn't touch on, which is just my theory. And again, I don't want to talk about what I think, just what I can testify to. But, you know, in Revelation 9, a star falls, and its name is Apollo. And, you know, in the Bible, stars are angels, just for the record. And I think in the Greek, I think they're also angels up there. They're demigods. Well, a star falls, it's Apollo, and he's given the keys to the abyss. because Jesus won them back when he died for our sins. But he gives them to Apollo for just a little bit in the last hour of planet Earth, or Earth, whatever it is. And Apollo opens up the abyss and lets out his 4 fallen angel friends. Now, it's strange because Apollo is Satan, right? Lucifer changes his name. But he didn't get chained up. He was a voyeur. He was an instigator. He didn't do the dirty. And now he opens up the abyss and he lets his friends out. It's pretty strange. Charlie Manson didn't do the dirty, but he instigated it. I think it's kind of weird, similar. You know what I'm saying, right?
Something? Yes. Could I just interject something?
Yes, please.
Now, here is one of my fortes as far as being a broadcaster here. I look at what I call synchromistic metadata. And you could apply this in just what you're talking about here. Apollyon sounds like is like. Elon, Elyon, Apollyon. You can make that inference there, can't you? I mean, so the things you're talking about, whether or not that's the actual case, we need to take this stuff seriously and consider it. And I'm all about the consideration of these ideas, especially because the things you're saying, so much of it can be verified, like the background details. You could verify Elon's grandfather being involved in this technocracy movement. This is all out there in the public record. And all of this stuff is more accessible now than it has been in the past. So now you could find this. We are living in the time of revelation. Everything that was done in the dark, behind the veil that's been hidden for so long, is coming to the light of day now. This is all part of the process going on of revelation here in these end times in which we are living. And certainly we can see a lot of this stuff and we could connect the dots in that way. So I think it's important that we put that out there. So you're talking about, first of all, a star falling from heaven, and you're absolutely correct. In a lot of their occult systems, they regard the stars in the sky, these luminaries in the sky, as being either what they would present as ascended masters or some type of spiritual entities. So that is the representation that's given there. So when you look on the occult concepts here, you could see how all these dots tend to connect in that way. And I think you're absolutely spot on with the things you're saying here and how you're presenting them. So people can take your story however they see fit to do so. And I would invite them, go investigate the things that Rosemary is saying here. They deserve more scrutiny. We need to be mindful of this stuff. We need to realize the times we're living in. And now's the time to act. Get your hearts right with God, ladies and gentlemen. It's a free gift. Jesus Christ paid the ultimate price for us, and he presented this free gift for us. Let's take advantage of that. All it is, it's very simple. A lot of people will over-complexify Christianity. It's as easy as accepting Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior in your heart and professing that with your mouth. Plain and simple. If you do that, there's little else that needs to be said or done as far as that goes. He will give you that forgiveness and that redemption that you need. We're all in a fallen state. And this world that we're living in right now is going through some really transformative times. And we're beginning to see some of these processes playing out. We're beginning to see the things in the book of Revelation playing out in real time before our eyes. And most people have completely blinded themselves to that. So the important takeaway for all of you is understand these people that are in positions of power in this world, they don't get there by accident. There's long-term planning that's gone on with this. And it always, always, always ties back to the occult, all of it. As much as I don't want that to be the case, and I preach this all the time, you'll always find the occult. You'll always find transhumanism when you explore all of these avenues of thought. What is transhumanism? It's the ultimate fulfillment of technocracy. Let's put it this way. This is a generational thing. There's family bloodlines involved. And there's a lot to this. So we need to consider these ideas. And I think I'm getting a little bit of reverb on my microphone here, so I'll turn down my gain a little bit. But it's interesting. I find your story very interesting, and it does need to be told. And it does need to reach people. They can draw their own conclusions about this stuff. But we're just putting it out there because you don't land in a position like Elon Musk has landed in by accident. There's long-term planning, and we can see how all the dots behind the scenes tend to connect with things that have been revealed through conspiracy culture through the years with the story you're telling. And I do find it interesting and compelling that you're sharing your story, and I think it needs to be shared. And I thank you for your courage in stepping forward and doing this.
You're welcome. So I think I paint and I'm stenciling the words Elyon in Hebrew. In the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis 14 is the first place I came across it by divine appointment, where God introduces himself to Abraham and says, "I'm the God Most High." And I saw those words and I slammed the book shut. I said, "God, what's he doing in there?" And God said, "That's not him, that's me." And I hid my head on the covers and cried some more, I think 3 years. So when I met Elon, May said his name was Elyon, and she'd say it with that accent, Elyon. And then, but when I was going to be left alone with him for the first time, alone, like she's going away, I got no straight answers. It could be 3 hours, 3 weeks, I don't know. And I have somebody, and Joaquin will bring me what I need. You know, I have somebody that'll bring me food and cigarettes and whatever I need like that, but I'm not allowed to have a TV at her house. And, but when she was leaving and I said, "Lady, what's your kid's name? I can't keep calling him sweetie and honey and come here, kiddo, you know, little buddy." And she said, "Call him El. It means God." Ugh. And I said, she looked at me, and I always feel that I have to respond. Like I'm just always will respond with a command. And I said, "I'll call him Ellie, like Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies." God gave me a way out so I wouldn't blaspheme him, because my other aunt told me, "You do whatever the heck she tells you to. Do whatever she says. Don't argue, don't disagree." You know, all that, right? So God gave me a way out. And then, but it was weird because I snapped I assumed an Ellie Mae personality right there. It created an altar. I started wearing moccasins and being a wild girl in the woods. And I eventually did run away on my horse and nanny for the Hells Angels. So, you know, I did eventually become a wild girl. And so I don't still talk like I'm from the city. But she told me his name was El. It means God. Because I couldn't say the Elyon part. But when she came back, I heard her call in that all the time. It made more sense. Because she'd always said it where she was. I couldn't see her lips. She had that accent. And I was like, write it down. You know, I want to see it. Like, because I was a kid in school learning my vowels, you know. A-E-I-O-U, how to pronounce it in the dictionary. And this was very strange. It wasn't an easy name, but it was Elyon. And then I ran away one time, and when I came back, it was Elyon. And then I ran away farther. I actually went and got baptized at an Assembly of God, and then they had a youth retreat in the mountains, like snow skiing and stuff. And I ran away to that. I forged my signature. And then somebody took me to some pastors, wanted to save me. They took me to Los Angeles, and I started going to John Wimber. He started the Vineyard Christian Fellowship. He wrote Chuck Smith's opening song, "Oh, let the Son of God enfold you." You know, that song that plays for the Chuck Smith show, the Word for Today. Anyway, John Wimber was the keyboard player for the Righteous Brothers. He opened for the Beatles at the Ed Sullivan Show. He was not nobody, but I was just a kid. I didn't know. And these people brought me to the pastor to get deliverance prayer. And he probably had Lonnie and all those guys in there from, you know, Jesus Revolution, because Lonnie was going to that church. Keith Green was there. Even Bob Dylan was in the foyer. And I told my professor at college, I said, "Yeah, I met Bob Dylan." as a kid, I bummed a cigarette off of him in the lobby of a church. And Bob didn't have an appointment, and I did. And I went into John Wimber's, and they're all praying and talking in tongues and laying hands on me. And John Wimber jumped back, and he said, "Little girl, what do you know about the Antichrist?" And I said, "Well, John, I don't know the Antichrist, but I've been babysitting that little boy that will present the mark of the beast." And everybody, whoa, because John had a word, right? That's a word of knowledge. For all the charismania, whatever. John Wimber, my beloved pastor who read me the book of John over a microphone, had a word of knowledge, and that confirms to me he's legit. And I said, well, I babysit this little boy because I asked if Elon was the Antichrist. And I was told no, but he'll present the mark. And the Bible tells me, to my understanding, because as an adult, I'm not, look, I'm the chief of sinners. I've made horrible mistakes, horrible. It's a miracle I get to be on Team Jesus. I'm so thankful, unworthy. Thank you, God. So, Elon Musk will present the mark of the beast. It was my understanding through all my reading, my Left Behind and my Hal Lindsey and my Chuck Missler and my J. Vernon McGee and all that, Chuck Smith, Chuck Missler, everybody, that the false prophet presents the mark of the beast. And even though they said the false prophet was going to be the Pope, we all hope we know what we're talking about. We'll see what God does. But bottom line is that, like, I was on somebody's show who stole my testimony and then gave me a copyright strike for giving my own testimony. She calls herself June Knight Warrior. But there's a lot of Christians that believe that the false prophet has to be a Christian religious leader. I said, it doesn't say that. It said he's the false prophet. Jesus Christ wears a t-shirt that says, "Occupy till I come." Jesus says, "Occupy till I come." I'm sorry, God, he doesn't wear a t-shirt. But Elon wears one that says, "Occupy Mars." So that's direct blasphemy, because that's pushing the boundaries. That's saying we're doomed here when God said, "Occupy till I come." So, that's one tricky false prophet. He smokes a blunt. He's married to transgender rock stars. I don't know if you want to cross any of those boundaries, but,
Well, Here's what I could add to the context of this.
You can delete what you need to.
I have been saying for the longest time, I think as Christians, we're looking in the wrong place for not only the arisal of the Antichrist, but also of the false prophet. And that's why I did that broadcast on Petrus Romanus, Elon Musk, and Rosemary's baby, because I don't think it's going to necessarily be the Pope, as many have predicted. I think it's coming from elsewhere. And it's the same thing with the whole nature of who or exactly what is the Antichrist. I think this has to do with the combination of the human being with technology, with the AI, the artificial intelligence, and that this will be the first fruits of that system, of this beast system. The Antichrist will be the first fruits of transhumanism. I really feel that strongly in my spirit, and this is the premise that I've gone at, because know ye not that ye are the temple of God? Well, what is the abomination of desolation? Well, it's when the Antichrist stands in the temple and presents himself as God. And what are these people all about? They're all about trying to elevate themselves to the position of God. It's all about this old occult concept of apotheosis. And I've been preaching this for a long time now. And certainly I could see many of the same correlations being presented here in your take on things and present in your story about this. And I find it very interesting. And like I said, I'll leave it to the listeners out there to make the determination themselves as to the nature of all of this. They can go ahead and investigate for themselves. I encourage people, go investigate. Go look into the things that Rosemary is telling us here. Go look into all of the things that I've talked about here in the past, because certainly these people in positions of power in this world, they believe in these concepts and they act upon these concepts. So like I always advise, you could take this and think it's total nonsense, or you could take it a little more seriously. But understand, people in positions of power take this stuff seriously, and the things they do to act on their beliefs affects all of us. So it's not really relevant whether you believe it or not. They believe it. That's the important thing. So I always caution people with that. So even if you think what's being said here is total nonsense, I would advise, no, it's not. Because it's all part of this tapestry that they've been weaving together for this new world order system that they want to put in place, this beast system, the Antichrist system. And it is a system, certainly. So we have these connections to it. And it's been revealed to you from some of these places of prominence and power in this world, what exactly some of this is going to shape up to be and what some of the players on the world stage are going to be. So we need to consider this information. And I'm all about considering all kinds of information. I'm not closed-minded about this stuff. And it does warrant further investigation by people who have the means and the wherewithal to do so. So that's kind of where I see this whole thing going. I appreciate your testimony and your story. And like I've said, I have no reason to disbelieve what you're telling me. In fact, many of the different elements of your story align with things that I had known previously that I know to be true. And portions of your story that I've investigated have panned out to be exactly what you said. So that being the case, all those things that I could publicly verify, those things are in place and they are verifiable by anybody that looks for them. But there are elements of your story that I don't have the connections to delve into. So I would leave that to the listeners out there. Whatever wherewithal or resources you have to investigate some of these other claims, please do so. I think this story deserves not only an audience, but scrutiny as well. We need to investigate these things because certainly we are seeing all of this stuff playing out in real time on the world stage. The book of Revelation is unfolding before our eyes. We've been told and warned about this. So we need to take this seriously. So even if you're not of the mindset that you think there's truth to it, you still need to investigate it, and you'll be shocked at what you find. I will assure you of that, because this has been going on for a very long time, and there are these people on the world stage that seem to follow a different set of rules than what we do in the greater public mindset here. They have a different type of morality. They follow different spiritual paths. They have different spiritual guidances directing them. And I talk about this stuff ad nauseum all the time. So it's important that we have this insider information available to us. So like I said, worthy of consideration for sure and investigation. And I would invite anybody to go ahead and investigate what you're saying here. And if people want to contact you, Rosemary, can we put your contact information in the show notes? I think we've
Thank you so much for asking. Yes, please. I started off warning the world that Elon would someday add the letter Y, the alphabetical Y, back into his name. And I didn't want the church to be ignorant. When that happens, he will be declaring himself God. Just for the record. And Gonzo was really great. He did some shows, but you asked me about that. And I'll talk to you about that privately because that's his personal business, but I'll tell you. So I believe that Elon, if he does, you'll understand why, because the word Elyon means God Most High. With the L in front of it, it means God, God Most High, the Most High of all the gods.